So we've talked about preaching in difficult circumstances the last couple of weeks, preaching through hostility, and then apathy. We come really to the third piece of that, preaching through adversity, which is a broad category for anything that the pastor might be struggling with in his personal life or maybe in the context of the local church, and persisting in that. So what are some specific ways, and you mentioned many of them in the book, but what are some specific challenges you've faced as you've been preaching and in the preaching ministry?
I think it's important for every pastor to understand that this week, this category of adversity is to be a reminder that rarely do we step into the pulpit ever at 100%.
Yeah.
There's been some kind of personal affliction that's happened that week. We may not be feeling well physically. We may be just emotionally spent, and preaching is heart work. We may have had a conflict with somebody in the church, and then we got to preach and look at them in the face as we preach. Like there's so many factors that can work against us feeling fresh and strong and able. And I can rarely think of times where I actually would say I was 100% stepping into the pulpit. I think that expectation is important to just establish from the beginning. But yeah, there's been times where I've physically felt bad, just physically, not emotionally exhausted, mentally exhausted from the week and from preparation. In those early years, one of the challenges I faced as far as adversity was things that would happen to me right before we go to the service. And then I'd have to try to preach. Then you add to that the adversity of, the baby didn't sleep well Saturday night.
Yeah, that's right.
And family struggles, marriage issues, and all those things play into the adversity. And then we have to mention spiritual warfare that pastors especially face. We're on the front lines of that. And the enemy, the best way to disrupt our ministry is to try to sabotage the weekly preaching of the word. So there's tons of things that bring adversity. It's one of the reasons I love that we brought in Spurgeon in the book. Great because examples. He was seen as a lion, and rightfully so. But his depression, his bouts, physical bouts with gout and other physical problems, the emotional trauma of when people died, when the riot happened in the middle. I mean, there's just so much adversity he faced, and yet he preached through it. And that's really what we're talking about. But I know you faced some adversity in your life as well that you've had to work through the years as well.
Oh yeah, some of that family struggle, just family health crisis, and you're concerned for your own family, and then you have to preach, and you have to reemphasize to the people the faithfulness of God, and in days where you're wrestling with that. You believe it, but you're wrestling with that, and so it can be a challenge to do that. But I think it brings up a point that you made in an earlier week about the pressure to hit a home run every week.
Right.
I mean, the thought that every week when I deliver this sermon, it's going to be the one that is published. They're going to want to transcribe it, or it's going to go viral on the internet. Everybody's going to want to watch it, and we kind of feel that burden every week. And the long-term preaching ministry is not about trying to hit home runs. It's about faithfully exposing this text and apply it. So baseball analogy, it's just about putting the ball in play every time. And it really is allowing the Scripture to do its work.
You bring up an excellent point in that the other adversity that is probably the most consistent in a pastor's life is the adversity he actually brings on himself. With expectation and the pressure that he puts on himself, maybe self-imposed by others, but I think when we talk about adversity, and even when we use Spurgeon example and other things, we're tempted to want to make it all external, outside of ourselves.
That's right.
But Spurgeon's battle with depression, that sidelined him even months at a time, is real, and something a lot of pastors deal with, that emotional stirring up that makes life difficult to do anything, including trying to turn around and preach. And the enemy will definitely want to try to even take advantage of what's happening in that. So it's a really excellent point to make, that there's an adversity that we bring on ourselves, that just a guilt and shame over, man, you did not do well. And that's why Mondays are so hard for pastors.
Right.
It's not because necessarily the sermon was bad. It's what we do to ourselves.
That's right.
It's kind of the self-loathing we pour on ourselves in a very unhelpful way. I mean, that falls into the category of adversity for sure.
Yeah, maybe the place to leave the conversation is to remind ourselves that it's a Spirit-empowered event, that the preaching of the gospel must be empowered by the Spirit. So we have to pray and lean on the Spirit's power to be able to do that. We're not doing it in our own strength. Instead, it's a reminder that we can't.
2 Corinthians 12 specifically reminds that the strength of Christ comes in our weakness.
That's right.
So we should embrace the adversity, not be afraid of it, and just recognize this is just what it is. And it doesn't mean that God won't even uniquely work in a powerful way when we preach.
Yeah, that's right.